Good morning, Paula. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Doing well.
And I see our list of participants are signing in, so we will give it one more minute and then start exactly at 11:02.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite increment of time, 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah. I get that all the time. It'll only take 2 minutes, and a half an hour later, we're still at it.
That sounds like most of your or my conversations.
Yeah, it really does.
Well, I do see that our list of participants is growing rapidly, so I think I'm going to go ahead and start at 1 minute and 37 seconds. To be just a little bit shorter. First of all, I am hoping that everybody on the phone managed through the storms yesterday without any incident. I know it was pretty severe in parts of our markets, but I hope that everybody is healthy and did not have any damage to their property. Good morning to everybody. I'm Gail Letts, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this week's edition of Let's Talk. Let's Talk is a webinar program designed specifically for women that discusses topics of finance, career, business, and health and wellness. Today's program is the second in a three-part series, looking at issues that are important to us on diversity, inclusivity, and equity. Our program today will run 55 minutes, and we welcome questions and comments from our listeners using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Our topic today is how to create a culture that embraces these values. And with us, we have two highly respected leaders in the field of education. Dr. Paula Pando is president of J. Sargent Reynolds Community College, a post that she has held since September of 2018. Prior to joining J. Sargent Reynolds, Dr. Pando was with Hudson County Community College and St. Peter's University, where she held numerous leadership roles. Dr. Pando has a doctorate in education leadership from Rowan University, a Master of Arts in Education Administration from St. Peter's University, and a Bachelor of Arts from Stockton University. Dr. Pando is recipient of a Presidential Fellowship from the Aspen Institute for Community College, the Community College Spirit Award from the New Jersey Council of County Colleges, and a Woman of Achievement from the Hudson County Board of Freeholders. Also joining us is Ed Greer, Dean of the School of Business for Virginia Commonwealth University, a position that he has held since March of 2010. Before joining VCU, Dean Greer spent 29 years with the Walt Disney Company. His career spanned the globe from Orlando to Paris to Tokyo to Anaheim, giving him priceless insight into the international perspectives needed for students to flourish, one of my favorite words, now and in the future. As president of Disneyland Resort, he led an operation that comprised nearly $2 billion in annual revenue and over 20,000 employees. Dean Greer earned his Bachelor of Business Administration and Accounting from Duquesne University before starting a career as a CPA and auditor at Ernst & Ernst, which is now known as Ernst & Young. Welcome, Paula. Welcome, Ed. So let's talk. So, each of us has a story regarding our careers, and I would love for you to share your story with us. So Paula, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Gail, Ed. I'm so pleased to be on this panel with you. Very proud to share our stories with this audience today. So I think when I think about my life, there are multiple roles that I've played and titles that I've had, the title of mom, daughter, sister, etc. But when I think about what makes Paula Paula and what makes me see the world the way that I do and pursue the career that I did, and that really is framed around being the daughter of immigrants. While I was born in the United States, my family moved back to their native Chile, South America, when I was just months old, and then returned to the United States when I was a school-aged child, having to learn English, customs, cultures, etc. But when you are a child of an immigrant, oftentimes you have to take on adult responsibilities. translating for your parents, whether it's a lease or a doctor's appointment, or my personal favorites, back to school nights, where I always gave myself a very favorable translation of what the teacher was saying. Mommy, she said, I'm fantastic. But you grow up quite quickly, because I was very blessed to have two parents who 50 plus years later are still married and as in love as when I was a child. I realized that while I had a lot of support in spirit, working two jobs to put me through Catholic school, even though we weren't Catholic, trying to make sure that we had the best educational opportunities possible, there was the college-going culture that was foreign to our family, even though the goal was always that their children would get a college education. So Gail, Ed, and listeners, participants, for me, figuring it out on my own really provided me with my own worldview about the difficulty that so many students who have the capacity, the tenacity, the will to go after something better than perhaps where they've come from, without the help of navigating this incredibly complicated thing called American higher education, how to finance it, how to seek out opportunities, whether it's financial aid or scholarships, how to select a major, how to select a school, what is good debt, what is bad debt, all of these things. And that's not even counting perhaps the hardest hurdle, which is the hurdle of self-doubt. Do I belong? Am I supposed to be here? That experience for me as a young person navigating, having to grow up very quickly as a person who had to translate at 10, 11 years old, complicated things for parents and figuring things out on my own, but then understanding in retrospect how much harder I had to work to just navigate our systems on my own, propelled me into a career of higher education. And I've spent nearly 30 years since finding ways to help remove those barriers that have little to do with a student's capacity, their will, or their talent, but all of the things that occur outside of that classroom that derail far, far, far too many students from fulfilling their potential. So my career, my worldview, my position as an educator is informed in large part with those experiences that I had navigating higher education with a band of cheerleaders at home who couldn't really help me navigate it.
Fabulous, Paula. What an inspiration. Thank you. Ed?
Well,
story.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Paula. My story is quite different from Paula's, but in a lot of ways it's the same. My family, I was the first one in my family to go to college, so that wasn't something that was built into my family history. My parents didn't have that opportunity. And yet, you know, being young, you didn't know what you didn't know, and my parents were always supportive. We were Catholic. I know Paula wasn't Catholic, but I went to a Catholic school as well, and my mom worked there to help support us to get through those school days. Didn't know how much she really worked then, but looking back on it, it was very supportive. But the same, I didn't have this built-in North Star where I was going, what that would be, you know, how I would navigate through going through high school and then college and that type of thing. So in some ways, I was somewhat lucky. I went to a Catholic high school as well, and I was fortunate enough that there was scholarship opportunities for me to leave Atlanta, Georgia, you know, which is a loving place for my family and all that type of thing, but not a great opportunity for me. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college. So I had a wonderful opportunity. I had a great scholarship in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So that gave me a different point of view of the world. I didn't have a whole lot of navigation, say, what would I do, go in business, that type of thing. So I kind of stumbled upon that in business, and I was an accounting major and went on to do some pretty good things, I would say, in my career. But I had this doubt. I really did. It was almost like, can I really do this? And so there was not a lot of success from a college standpoint, my family standpoint, but somehow I made it, and I got a lot of confidence after I started getting good grades in accounting and that type of thing. And I didn't think I could ever pass the CPA exam. And then when I did it, I was like, I can do this. Maybe I belong, maybe not. But along the way, that self-doubt was always there. And sometimes even as I progressed in business, I said, should I be here? Am I an imposter? Am I good enough to be that person that can strive for those higher goals? And I would say yes, but I think like Paula also, education's been so important to me, transformational for me. And my business career was successful. And the reason I came back to education, because it was important to me. And I want to tell students how important it is for them. And what can I do to help students, no matter their backgrounds, their experiences. And I avail myself to students all the time saying, look, this is a tough road. You have to pick your own path, but someone help me so I can help other folks as well. So just going to college was transformational for me. Growing up in Atlanta, a Black neighborhood, very little opportunity there, going to Pittsburgh, a big city by my standards, and just the enormous business opportunities there just changed my life. The cultural differences. I grew up in, like I said, African-American community, which is great. But in Pittsburgh, they had all these different cultures, whether it's from the Italian culture, the Jewish culture, the Polish immigrants, all of that. And Paula speaks of being an immigrant. So I experienced that maybe generations later, but it shaped me who I am today as a man, as a person, and my worldview. And Gil, in your introduction, you talked about my international opportunities. That shaped me as well. I stress that with our students. Take these opportunities to live abroad, live in a different city. It changes you and you grow from it. My children had that opportunity to live abroad, and I think they're better citizens of the world because of that.
So it is wonderful, and such a wonderful segue into some of the conversation that we're going to be having today. One of the things, Ed, kind of just piggybacking on one of your comments about how you have encouraged your students to get out and try these different experiences internationally in particular. I have always, in my 35 years in corporate America, I would always tell people that if you are in your comfort zone, you're not growing. Mm-hmm. So whatever that comfort zone is, we need to continue to push. And I'm hoping that, I'm positive, as a matter of fact, that is resonating with many of the people that have joined us for the webinar. For those who have joined us, I think in very short order, you've probably figured out very quickly why I invited Paul and Ed. First of all, they are two people that I have a great relationship with, and I just think so much of. And even though the three of us are from very different backgrounds, we do have a lot of similarities, which I think is one reason why we've always been able to talk about so many issues. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I was the person who went through all the self-doubt on did I not believe I belong? I figured it out. I really didn't have role models to look at, and I had to kind of look around and just believe that there was going to be something better that I wanted to do, that I wanted to push myself. And I hear that with both Paula and with Ed. So I titled the program, How to Build a Culture. And I was very specific on not saying program, because again, having been in corporate America for 35 years, it does bother me that everyone thinks that a program is going to solve a problem, regardless of what the issue is. But specifically, I see just everybody wanting to jump on the bandwagon of a training program to solve diversity and inclusivity and equity. And very seldom do they even mention inclusivity and equity. It's always diversity. Let's put a program in so we can increase diversity. And that program might make an immediate impact. And if people have to make commitments at the end of that program, that impact might last a little longer, but eventually it dies. And unless we change the culture, we do not change the organization. So Paula and Ed, and I'll start with you, Ed. Throughout your career, I am sure that you have seen examples of both positive and negative cultural situations around diversity and equity and inclusion. Can you talk about what you've seen, what you've learned, and how these experiences have changed your personal leadership?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it starts at the top. I think if the leaders of any organizations don't really believe it, not more, also believe it, that they actually live what they say their cultural endeavors are going to be, That's where it starts. So I would say that you have to understand who you are, where you are, and be open to really, you can talk about numbers. You can say, well, how many women, how many African Americans, how many, people, Hispanic, whatever. Those are important. But at the end of that, I think it's equally as important how you're living those aspects, and not just by hitting the metrics. Are you living by your set of values every day? And do people know what you believe in? I've always been struck by people that say, well, I had no idea what Ed's going to do. I think people know what I'm going to do, because I say it's building character. You should not surprise people that work for you or people that you are working for. They know who you are and what you stand for. Now, you may have some variability on decision-making and that type of things. I was surprised by that decision, but they're not surprised who you are as an individual. So you asked me about some things I've seen that throughout my career. And many times you say we need a diversity program, we need to increase the numbers, whatever it might be. Now we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we had all these other things out there. But it's really how it resonates in your company. I'll give you an example of that. When I was at Disney, we had, this idea that we got to be inclusive. And overall, I think we were. But I think we went through, implicit bias and things like that. But one person that really changed my viewpoint on diversity, his name is Frans Johansson, and he had this book called The Medici Effect. And it was about what happened during the Renaissance periods, and the Italians brought all these people from different cultures in, and they got all this idea generation, and it launched the Renaissance. And so as he was telling these stories to our groups, and it's a session we're having on diversity, he didn't mention diversity once. He just mentioned how all these different cultures come together, and it can be a powerful thing, not just for the culture, but for the business and everything else around it, society in general. So we use that as a platform, saying, let's talk about how we can be inclusive, make sure we bring different cultures together, different points of view, not necessarily different cultures, in a business setting. And that was very powerful for me. And I still talk to him today about what he said that day and how powerful it was for our folks. Because he said was, you can say diversity all you want. You can say inclusion all you want. But how does it feel in the atmosphere in your business? And so people know it. You can do surveying on all that. But I would hope people that come to School of Business say, we feel welcomed here. We feel inclusive here. Now, you can't be 100% of that, but it's up to me as a leader to talk to people, how they're feeling about it, how they feel about me. Tell me how they feel about me. Am I really living those values? So that's how I feel about it, Gail. I think that one instance of talking about different cultures, how it came together, and how you can translate that to your individual business, maybe not different cultures, but different individuals. The thing that he stressed, though, from a business standpoint, not only is the right thing to do, but it's good business. Your business will flourish when you can have an idea generation coming from different parts of your organization. Mm-hmm. So if people don't feel comfortable in telling you things, you won't progress as a leader. And I always felt that was important for me. The other thing I will tell you about, I had an experience with Colin Powell. This was back in my Disney days early on. He came to talk about his program he has about volunteerism. But one of the things he talked about that too was that he talked about an experience as a military person. And he said, when the soldiers stopped talking to me as a leader, I've lost it. So what it meant for him is that all the variety of people that are in the military, if he couldn't get the feedback from them and learn from that, the culture will just diminish and it won't be as powerful. So those are two small examples, and we can talk about dozens, but they stuck with me quite a bit, and I still live by those today.
It's interesting, and thank you that you mentioned Colin Powell. His book, My American Journey, is one of my favorite books, and I actually have done quite a few programs on that. There are a couple things that you said that really resonated with me. You start off by talking about, this is about who you are and where you are, and that people will flourish when they are in a culture that supports this. What I could hear as you were talking about that is I could hear the belief coming from the inside as opposed to the outside. Everybody sees the outside and makes judgments on people, but it's what's inside our character that really makes a difference. And again, for the folks that are on the phone, and a lot of the questions that I get so often, I have so many people that come to me and talk about their career challenges. And one of the first questions I ask about is their culture. Because if you're not in a culture where you believe the goodness is radiating from the inside and people are doing the right things for the right reasons, might not always have the right answers, but they're being driven by that right moral compass, I think people have a much higher probability of succeeding. So again, when we talk again about that word flourish and culture and who you are and understanding your values, I think that is really important. Paula, love to hear your thoughts on that. You're on mute, Paula.
What I love what Ed was saying, and we have a mantra among our senior leadership team, and that is, I don't need to be right, and you don't need to be right. We need to get this right. We need to get it right. And so feel free to poke the bear if that's how you see me, because we need to get it right. I don't need to leave this room feeling like I'm right. And I believe I've created that culture where we need to leave with the best idea, the best solution to a problem. So I'll say, and I agree so much with Ed, that it really does institutional or organizational culture. Who's at the top and what do they espouse? And what do they do? And I've always said, we can talk about our priorities as an organization. We can do a lot of talking about that. But to me, your priorities truly are measured not by what you say, but by two things: what you resource, so where you spend your money, and where you spend your time and focus. And for me, leading this organization, the fundamental question is why? Why is this important? Why is equity important in our context? Why is that important? And for me, the why, it comes down to two very, very simple things that are non-judgmental to any group. Why is equity important? Because a strong democracy, I believe, depends on an educated and enfranchised citizenry. So access to education and completing something of value and feeling that they belong, that there's a place, that there's a job at the end of that. And two, our economy depends on it. Our economy depends on people who have long been sidelined from a good economy, from good jobs. And these good jobs, not all of them require a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or beyond, but require a post-secondary credential. And so that why is so front and center without it being about diversity, that this is about equity, and our democracy and our economy depends on everyone participating, everyone participating. So what we do here is we go after, I call it, the head and the heart, the head and the heart. And maybe it's because of the Catholic school, I'm just missing one more, but the head and the heart. How do we activate that student voice is so important. Those stories that students will tell, and we've relied long in higher education on anecdote, on the story of the one. Powerful stories, but what does the data actually tell us about who is succeeding at our college and who is not? And when we pull out the data and use that as a mirror, and we can see that our Black African-American students, let's say, are achieving at half the rate as perhaps their white and wealthier classmates. When we see that, you can hear kind of the breath taken out of the room, because there is a recognition there. And then peel back the onion even more. Well, who are they? And what were their grades? Because some of the audience will be thinking, well, they failed out, they couldn't do the work. Well, let's peel that back. So 2,000 students who didn't return, who started in fall 2018 and didn't return in fall 2019, their average grade point, their average GPA was a 3.1. So let's put that to the side, that the dropouts are not flunk outs. And I ask the question, because we always ask about the student, did they have too much going on in their life? Did they have too much? Were they not serious about this? Were they not prepared? So I will ask the question, and what about us? What about me? What did we miss? Because they were making it academically. So that is the approach that I take, the why, is the most important thing for me, the why, because the what we do and how we do it, that can change. But why it's important, no crisis, no pandemic, nothing is going to change that why, because our democracy and our economy depends on everyone participating. So that's been my approach, where it's not pointing out, you did this well, you did this poorly, but let's be clear about our why, and let's be clear about where we're being successful and where we're not, and let's peel back the onion on what we need to do to organize ourselves around the students we have, and not the ones that perhaps some of us imagined we'd have when we were in graduate school.
Mm-hmm. Paula, those are incredibly powerful comments. I think understanding the why is so important. There are numerous books written on even asking the question why. I think one suggests that you ask why 5 times. Now, I've been in a room where people have done that, and by the time somebody gets to 4, the room is about ready to explode. But it is interesting how the self-realization will take place when you really truly try to seek to understand before being understood. You had mentioned that understanding why a population would leave when they've got an average GPA of a 3.1.
Mm-hmm.
And so many companies that we are talking to are asking me questions about, they might be able to attract a diverse population, but they're not able to retain. And my first question is, have you asked them why? Well, they've got a better off. Have you really asked why people are leaving? Because I think you'll find a completely different answer to that when you ask the question and then listen. And then, yeah, sometimes you do need to ask it 2 or 3 times, because very often when you ask the why the first time, people will not give you that honest answer. Before we go on to this question, I love the fact that both of you mentioned going to Catholic school. I too went to Catholic school. I will say that I flunked. The only time I've ever flunked a course in my entire life was religion in 2nd grade in Catholic school. My parents were horrified. And what's funny about it is the reason I flunked was because I had difficulty as a 7-year-old just accepting fact. I needed to understand behind it. What does that mean? And I would constantly ask why. And they would say, you have to have trust, you have to have belief. Well, I wanted to know why. And I flunked. So with that said, there's probably a little too much information, but self-declaration, I actually flunked religion in Catholic school. I am positive that both of you throughout your careers have seen exemplary examples of where people in building their cultures have made significant opportunities for others. And I'm also positive that you have seen examples where people in institutions have said the right things, but they've derailed the success through the back door. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about the best practices that you've seen and some of the things that you've seen that just didn't work that other people might learn from. So Paula, can we start with you on that?
Sure. I think one of the reasons why many of these efforts to improve, enhance, or transform institutional culture is because we address it with a program, with a person, with some sort of, you have to go through this training to become more woke. And truly that's kind of where I think a lot of why chief diversity officers sometimes fail, and they don't always, they got to be positioned to succeed. But organizations will hire a person or buy a program out of the box and expect that that person, that one person or that program will be able to address something that takes a long time, that it's not, this work is not a day, it's not a week, it's not a month or an academic year, but it's how do we embed these values of inclusivity throughout the organization, through the language that we use in our hiring. What do we as an organization aspire to be? There is language in those postings that will turn off or attract a candidate. when you speak about your values and what kind of organization you are and what kind of organization you aspire to be or work hard at being every day. So I believe in a distributive model where you might have a shepherd of the work, but that this is that every unit in the college. So, you know, our finance friends, you know, how is equity embedded in what you do? Let's look at our payment plans, because sometimes folks have a hard time connecting what it is that they do to that organizational goal or that value. So let's think about how we pay. Do all of our students have credit cards? No, they don't. Do all of our students have checking accounts? No, they don't. Some students are cash paying. How do we then open the door? So for us, it's taking a look in each one of our areas where we're able to define how we contribute or what we need to do. But I think the failings of many organizations is just hiring a person or getting a consultant to come in for 1 year and wave a magic wand, and now everyone sees the world the same way, which we don't want. Everyone has the same mantra or cadence. You know, for me, this is about an ethic of care. And that means caring for our employees, for our staff, and nothing like a global pandemic, a historic economic downturn, racial awakening, civil unrest, hyper-divided nation politically in an election year. How do we say we're leading with our values and taking care of our people? And if we're not doing that, how can we then expect our people to take care of our students? And in your world, that would be our clients, because one can't pour from an empty cup. So I think that it's got to permeate throughout the organization. It can't be a person, a magician coming in. I think that's where organizations have failed over and over and over, by one person, one program, one block of time, and now we can move on to the other thing.
I could not agree anymore. We actually are working with a client right now who asked us to come in and do some diversity training. And my answer was, we can do it, but I don't think you're going to get the result that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking at doing this the right way and you haven't been having the conversations before and you haven't been asking the tough questions, it's going to take a few years. One thing I will say though is you blink your eyes and you're there at some point. Mm-hmm. So if the leadership continues to say, this is important, and when that one person asks that really unusual question at the table, such as, well, does everybody have a checking account? And it's kind of like, oops, wait, I kind of missed that, because in my world, everybody has a checking account. You really want people to challenge the system and think very differently. So I think that those are absolutely fabulous comments, Paula. Ed, I'd love to know your thoughts.
Well, a couple of things, Gail. I'll go back to your horrible time at Catholic grade school. I thought it was because of the Latin you probably didn't do well, but let's move on from there.
Maybe. I'll stick with that story.
Okay. I would say just a couple of things. We keep talking about programs. We know they're important to have, but you have to have consistency. You have to kind of lead it through the whole thing. I do some leadership training for our students and different folks around the town, really around the country sometimes when I'm asked. And I revert back to my Disney years to try to make a point. Many times I would use the Disney movies as just so you remember. And one I've used, Zootopia, is these sloths. They're head of the motor unit, and it's a department that people go in, and it's slow moving. And people point to it. Sometimes it's that department's responsibility for customer service or for safety or for diversity, equity, inclusion. Is that department? No, it's not. I should. Any of those efforts is not one department. It's the entire unit's responsibilities. That had to be built into the culture. It's not just my responsibility of dean, it's everyone's responsibility. The other thing I would say about in my Disney years, we used to do all these surveys. We had a lot of information, and the leadership was always important. And there was one question on the survey that said, would you work for this leader again? Yes or no? And so you could look at that question and it was a barometer for almost everything else that you did in your respective unit because the leadership was important. So I will say from a best practice standpoint, Gail, you said, what have I seen? I worked with some great folks there, and his name was Judson Green, and he started this program called Performance Excellence. And this is before this whole diversity and the equity inclusion was coming. It was really how we treat people overall. Respect people, treat them like an individual, learn who they are so you have a better way of making them successful. And by doing that, your business would be successful. So he had this wonderful chart. It's one of those 4 grid things. You got to be very, very successful at your business, hitting targets and all that. But equally as important, how you got there. What is your organization saying about you? What environment are you creating? And we would measure these things. And he would say, you need to get on the bus. So you need to do both. And if you're not, you won't be here very long. So it was a little heavy-handed, people thought at first, but he was serious about it. But he gave everyone time, whether it's training that you needed, he put you through these paces. And I think it was very, very important for me from that standpoint. The other thing, what it led to, and so not just at Disney, in community college, any college, or your business scale, the atmosphere and how you treat people is going to be so, so important. So get to know who they are. And I tell people all the time, you need to know who I am, what's important to me, not just my professional life, but my personal life too. If you go, I tell people that they can do this, they thought it was crazy. I said, you can look at my calendar. You'll see in my calendar, there's some things about my personal life on there that I know that I have to do, whether it's I'm going to go meet my sons for dinner or lunch and talk about their business, or meeting my wife for dinner. I mean, you'll see it on there because you can't separate the two. So getting to know people is very, very important. What's important for them individually, and then you'll know what's important for them culturally. I'll tell you something happened to me the other day, and I didn't even know it was happening, Gail. We had a Zoom conference with one of our students that was struggling. And so on the call was 2 of my other colleagues. And this particular student was African-American. And she looked on the screen, she said, I didn't think you had other leadership in the school that was African-American. I didn't even think about it, Gail, because these were just my colleagues and they were the ones that were best suited for the meeting. So I think it's a powerful message to say, we live by being inclusive. And I think when we were preparing for this call, Paula said something to me and I didn't think about it. She said, Ed, I could be an Italian, or I could be, from Chile, but you're an African-American. There's no hiding that. And I think that's so important for people. I don't hide it. And and people say, oh, I don't see color. Yes, you do. You should. And I think that's important, to know who you are, to feel comfortable who you are, and don't change who you are. And if you can accept people for that, that's been a powerful thing for me, accepting who they are and knowing there's the differences between all of us, and understanding those nuances and getting to know people personally, not to meddle, right? People say, oh, I need time off. Because I said, you don't need to tell me. So I trust you that you're going to do the right thing. So those are 2 examples. I always kind of go back to how people remember things, and remember that it's not one department, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure it happens.
So, Ed, you and I have a long history together, and some of the things that you're saying are just making me smile and almost laugh inside, just thinking of some of the things that you and I have done together in our past. And you talk an awful lot about the value of the relationship and understanding the story. So to everybody on the phone, very funny story about Ed and me. Back about 6 years ago, on a very dreary day, I had attended a board meeting at VCU, and when I went to leave, and it was a dreary day, I backed into Ed's car. And I had no idea whose car it was. And I stressed, and I sent notices around the School of Business saying, I just backed into this car. I can't figure out who it is. Oh, and by the way, I did not leave a note, only because I was going to a funeral. And I didn't want to be late for the funeral, and it never even crossed my mind to leave a note. Make a long story short, about 3 weeks later, I was giving a presentation for the Center for Corporate Education at VCU. And Ed's assistant walked in and handed me a note and said, the dean would like to see you about an auto issue. And I remember looking at this, I'm giving the speech thinking, oh my gosh, it was Ed. What's he going to say to me? when I got, it was just so funny, but the reason he could do that is we had that relationship. And we could just a little bit, when you know who people are, the world is just so much different. Somebody that I had worked with years ago in banking had a great thing. And so in banking world, everything is performance driven, which is not unusual for academia either. And we see a whole camp of people who, first of all, just can't get the results done. And it's too easy to just throw those people away. I've always been told that when somebody is failing, the manager has to accept part of that responsibility to try to figure it out. You know, so if somebody is not getting the results, you just don't throw them away. You try to figure out what it is. If there is a mismatch of competency and skills, it's a different issue. But then you find the people, and this goes so much to this topic of culture, you find people who can get the results the wrong way. You can find people that get the results the right way, and they are the stars of your organization. But the ones that get there the wrong way. And one of the executives that I worked with years ago, he got up in front of an audience and he said, if you get the results the wrong way, I don't care if you're number one with your result performance, you will not be here. There is a right way and a wrong way to do business, and I expect everyone on my team to do it the right way. And that kind of goes to, it comes internally, and the leader setting the tone and saying, this is who we are. And if you're not on board, this may not be the right match for you. So thank you for those comments. Harvard Business Review wrote an article back in late 2016 entitled, Why Diversity Programs Fail. And they said that solutions such as command and control, just basically saying, we're going to be diverse and you have to fit into the box, that doesn't really work. We already talked about standalone training programs. We talked about hiring tests to determine who is acceptance of diversity and who is not. And people, by the way, can figure out how to pass all those hiring tests. You know, for performance, a lot of times organizations rely on performance ratings, and yet there are tons of studies that say both women and minorities typically are scored lower on performance ratings. And then there is saying, oh, we have grievance procedures. If somebody feels discriminated against in any way, they can file a grievance. Well, 80% of people who file grievances leave that organization within 2 years. So what Harvard Business suggested in their article is that they boil down to 3 basic ways that you can change the culture, that you can be successful. Number 1 is engagement, and actively engaging your leadership and key management in acceptance. And they talk about college recruitment programs for businesses, and they talk about mentoring programs. So Ed and Paula, mentoring programs. What have you seen that has worked? Because I've seen a lot that have not worked, probably because people are checking off the box. Paula?
You want me? One of the things that surprised me when I arrived at Reynolds, and it was 3 months in, and I was meeting with our faculty senate, and they asked, what are the surprises here? And I thought about it for a good long while because I'd done so much research about the college and really knew that I wanted to be here. So in some ways I knew more about the college than they knew about themselves, because I was looking at any publicly available information. And I thought about it for a while, and I said to them, there is one surprise for me, a big one. I said, in fact, it's not a surprise, it's a shock, that at the community college that serves the Richmond MSA, and given the makeup of this community, that we do not have a single solitary mentoring program for our students who, looking at our data, have been the ones who are most at risk of dropping out or stopping out, and that we've not put together programs that speak to the unique needs and challenges of these students. So that's something that we're putting up. I think the ways these programs, I think, have failed is exactly what you're saying and what Harvard said. They're check the box. I think the way these programs succeed is through the number one thing they talked about, which is engagement. Who are these men or who are these women? Who do they love? What do they do? What do they aspire? What are they afraid of? Versus saying, you know, counting diversity. Okay, we've got 15 Black men or we've got 15 African-American women, and now we're going to put them through this program, versus getting to know who the people are, what they aspire, what they're afraid of, and really tailoring the programs to that unique cohort of people, versus, again, this out of the box, one size fits all type of model. I think those are the programs that fail. The ones that are laser focused on the unique needs of the people in that program, which may be very different than the cohort the year before and the cohort that might be coming after. And the other piece is representation. I can't, and it's not about token, check off the box kind of thing, but in my experience, prior to coming to Richmond, I worked for a Hispanic serving institution. The majority of students were Hispanic and yet saw very little to no leadership that reflected their community. And I'll never forget a moment, we talk about story and the power of story, about a woman who came in, didn't speak a word of English, with her daughter and a piece of paper. And the piece of paper was that she finally received the Social Security number. She didn't know that we didn't require that at the college. We needed a different identification, and classes had already started. And she was looking for someone to help because they just brought their daughter over from Peru, and she didn't want her daughter to start working in a factory, because the $200 a week she would earn in a factory here in the United States was a month's salary in Peru, and she could be intoxicated to think that somehow that's a living wage, and it wasn't. The point of the story is, when I spoke to that mother in her native language, in Spanish, because it is my first language, and worked to help this young lady figure out a way and called in some favors, can we get her some tutoring so that she can get started? That woman walked in very humble. She walked out of my office a little bit straighter, just a little bit straighter, that the person helping her wasn't on the cleaning crew, which is the experience of many of our students of color, that the people who look like them work in the lowest, very, very visible jobs of cleaning, of being a security guard, honor in all of those jobs, but they don't see themselves in leadership. And so I think those mentoring programs, by knowing who the students are, by organizing ourselves around them and understanding their unique needs, and having models within the organization, that it's so that it's not just blah, 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 but you can actually see it in action. I was you 30 years ago.
Fabulous, thank you. And actually, Ed, I'm going to move to a second question, but if you do have comments on that one, please feel free, because I'll direct this second question to you.
All right.
So Harvard Business Review said engagement, number one. Number two was contact. And it talked specifically about self-managed teams and cross-training programs. And when it talked about the self-managed teams, it wasn't that we're going to put in finance, everybody just figure out who's going to run it. It was more on specific projects, and you bring people in that you know have diverse perspectives and diverse backgrounds, and then you let them run it and you let them create the structure and choose their own leader and so forth. Have you seen anything in the way of self-management teams, cross-training, or if you'd rather make a comment on mentoring, that would work as well?
Well, I'll do a little bit of both. I'll talk about the mentoring part because I think that's very, very important. When I was growing up, I didn't know what a CEO was. I had no idea. You know, it sounds kind of ridiculous now, but I did not know. And as I look at our students, variety of background, kind of like at Paula's, Reynolds, our students just don't know. So we started a program, it's changed the name, it was called RAM to RAM Mentoring. And so we would have alums match up with students. Again, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And it was not a forced thing. We had a student, had a whole variety of folks they can call upon as a mentor. And that relationship building was so, so strong. Kind of like what Paula was saying, it didn't necessarily have to be an African-American mentoring an African-American. It was who you felt comfortable with. And it was dynamite. And it still works very well today. So I think that engagement piece is so important, letting the students know we're here for you. We have a whole lot of folks out there that are willing to help. And that, by saying that alone, we're willing to help, was a breaking down the barrier. And they're a little vulnerable because students don't know. Can they trust Gail? Can they trust Paula? They trusted us that this pool of great folks we had would be really respectful for the students, and we're here to help. Not judgmental at all, we're here to help. So that was one thing. So you asked about cross-functional teams. We set up our executive MBA program to do exactly that. You know, so if you're not want to have a program that you're going to be in a diverse group working on projects, this is not the program for you, but it's a really, really wonderful program. The students that come out of that talk about being cross-functional teams. And what we do, Gail, we give them a dilemma after their first year. They kind of go through the phases, learning all the, you know, whether the productivity thing, you know, learning about supply chain, learning about analytics and machine learning, all that kind of stuff. Then I put it to work the second year. And we reach out in the community to say, give us a dilemma for our students. And so those are cross-functional teams. It doesn't always work. You know, sometimes there's a little bit of tension because it's competitive, and these are men and women that are out in the working place, but they're forced to have a cross-functional team. You may be given an assignment. You may be a marketing guru in your company, but you might be given a different assignment in the group. So that cross-functional team is a learning, what the end of this, the presentations they give to our clients, it's unbelievable. Sometimes it makes huge changes in those respective businesses. So we kind of live with that in these cross-functional teams in the executive programs. We also do that in undergrad, our Da Vinci Center that we have. We bring students from the art school, from humanities, from business and engineering to work on projects. And it's amazing what you see, that they kind of bang heads a little bit. And there's some stereotypical things we always say. You know, if you ask me who takes the feedback the best from the art school, engineering, history, or let's say business, you would probably say, oh, I don't know. The art students do. I think they are always getting critiqued. And Gail, you played the piano, so you probably got a lot of critiques from your piano teacher. So we learn from that, those cross-function teams. Those students have to learn to take the feedback, and they see it happen. And I'm not saying it's always the case with art students. They receive that feedback and react on it. Not always the case with our business or engineering, you know, because they're always right, of course, because I was always right. There's an answer. So I think those are things that we do for our students to make it very powerful, and is hugely successful, not just for the students, not just for the projects, but for the clients they serve as well. So
Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you. The third part of the article, and I'm only going to comment on it because we are coming up very close on the hour.
I know, we're running out of time.
Well, this is what happens every time I talk to you guys. It
I
goes
know.
it goes on and on because the conversation is just so real and so relevant. But just so that everybody knows, and again, the article is in Harvard Business Review called Why Diversity Programs Fail. You can Google it, and it's a great article to read. But it also talks about accountability, social accountability. And I know of a lot of organizations that, matter of fact, most organizations are not publishing their diversity numbers from an attraction or a retention standpoint. And the facts are the facts, and that's the old banker in me. You know, if you take a look and you don't see diversity in the unit and that becomes visible, all of a sudden there is some peer pressure that says, oops, maybe I'm not talking the talk, or walking the walk the way that I'm talking the talk. So I think that is really important. What a wonderful conversation, Paula and Ed. I just adore every time I get a chance to talk with you. I cannot wait for us to be all back in person again. And your comments today have been insightful. They've been authentic. And so very relevant. So I thank both of you for joining today. To our participants who are on the call, I want to say a very special thank you for joining us. Our next program is scheduled for Wednesday, August 26th. And we're going to actually talk about how do you attract, develop, and retain a diverse workforce. So please watch for those details. But until then, I thank everyone for being with us this morning. Until we all meet again, please stay healthy and please stay safe. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.